I have often fallen for the misconception that I can knit or crochet any item I like the look of, as in any item of clothing, I can replicate a knit or crochet version of that. Now, whilst technically that is true, just because you can do something doesn't always mean that you should do that. I've had to learn this the hard way over the last few years, so I thought today I would go through all of the things that I personally would not knit or crochet myself and would just simply go buy in a store. And on the flip side, things that you can buy in the store that I would never buy because I can just make it myself. With buying new, I mean generally things from like a high street shop, as well as thrifting, secondhand, just anything that isn't handmade, basically. Now, obviously, this is completely subjective and based on my own personal experiences, so do not feel like I'm personally telling you not to knit or crochet something. I also want to know up front that handmade doesn't always mean cheaper. I have often fallen for the trap of making something myself because I thought I would be saving money, when in actual fact, the yarn still costs a lot of money. Your time is also very important. So making it yourself very rarely is the cheapest option. Knitting and crocheting isn't fast fashion. It is meant to take a long time. I'm again by no means saying that knitting or crocheting something is bad because it takes long. Whenever I do talk about that, I simply just mean that there's only so many hours in the day, and if I want to wear something, then I should probably just buy it instead of spending hours and hours and hours making it, that by the time that I'm done with it, I'm actually sick of looking at it and I don't end up wearing it. I'm going to start off with the things that I personally do not make myself, and then later on I'll flip it and I'll talk about the things that I would never buy in a shop because I can make them myself. Generally, my alarm bells go off when I'm thinking of replicating a very specific item, and all of the inspo pictures, the mood board I'm creating only includes that sort of sewn shop item and not a lot of knitting and crocheting inspo. As an example, I've been obsessed with the headscarf trend at the moment, and I've spent so many hours trying to make a bandana, making a headband. I basically spent my time going through all of the head accessories, but I didn't actually just buy a headscarf, which probably would have cost me no more than £5, and I would have actually had the real deal. So whenever the store-bought item is my main and often only source of inspiration, I know that I don't really want to knit or crochet it. I'm just kind of using that as an excuse, you know? I do take inspiration from all sorts of things, but I think generally a good project for me is where I take inspiration from different crochet projects, some crochet stitches, then maybe a silhouette of an item I've seen at H&M's, and it all kind of then comes together. One big category that I instantly thought of for this is anything to do with fine knit. If the look I'm going for is fine knit, why am I then making a chunkier version of that? Because I do not have the patience to make an actual fine knit cardigan. So then instead I would then just like gravitate towards a thicker yarn and I would make a chunky cardigan, which yeah, that's nice, but that's clearly not what I wanted. And let me tell you, for years I did not buy a fine knit cardigan because there's always a thought at the back of my mind saying, oh, but I could make that because I know how to knit. False, you will never make it. Just buy the fine knit cardigan. The same kind of goes for crochet as well. You won't catch me making anything with a 1mm hook or fingering weight yarn. Like, I have really been wanting a filet crochet type net type curtain for some of our windows, and I genuinely thought, yeah, I could just make that myself. I am never going to make that myself. I don't know why I'm lying to myself. So that is something that I'm now instead gonna look out for when I go to the charity shops or the antique shops, you know? In a very similar vein, I would categorize jumpers as something that I typically would rather buy than make myself. If I'm pinning a lot of chunky big jumpers that have not necessarily fine stitch pattern, but like a finer stitch pattern with like a big turtleneck, am I really gonna use that thin of a yarn to replicate that style? Like, the stores have knitting machines for a reason. The reason is to make these pieces that you cannot knit by hand. I could also easily find like an oversized slouchy navy jumper in a charity shop for like £5 instead of spending like £100 and 100 hours knitting my own one. On the flip side, anything chunky I would never buy new. I will make that myself. A chunky cardigan with like the most basic shape, why am I looking at a £20 acrylic chunky cardigan at H&M when I can make one with actual nice materials? I also, with jumpers in particular, get a lot of wear out of the jumpers that I have bought new from shops. And in that regard, maybe this is controversial, I don't know, I don't mind buying something from a high street fast fashion store if I know I'm going to wear it for years and years and years on end. Some of the H&M and Zara jumpers that I still wear to this day, I have worn for the last 7 winters. So they're clearly serving their purpose, and that's all you really want. Then the next thing is very specific to me personally, because I know that many people love making this, but it is socks, specifically knitting socks. I have really wanted some knit socks for years now. Always pin them on my winter autumn Pinterest board and never buy them because I think this winter I'm definitely going to get into knitting socks. I have to this day never knit a pair of socks, and I have to this day also never bought a knitted pair of socks, which I should just do. I don't know what I'm waiting for and why I'm not just buying the socks, but this is very much a message to me personally. You are never going to knit the socks, so just buy them. I think also I'm generally more likely to replicate something in knit and crochet if I already really love that item, because that then kind of motivates me to make more of that. So maybe if I was to buy some pairs of knitted socks and I end up wearing them every single day, then I feel like that would motivate me more and interest me more in actually making my own pair, because I see the use in that, and probably also the inspiration to make something slightly different that I cannot buy in a shop. You will also never catch me knitting or crocheting a dress. I probably am just better off spending a bit more money on a knit dress rather than spending all the hours and hours of making it. I have made dresses before, however they were made on my knitting machine, which massively speeds up the process, and that is probably the only time that I would do that. I for the longest time was obsessed with this knitted dress, and the person who's wearing it said that it was handmade by her mum, and after I saw that I was like, wow, it was possible to hand knit a dress like that. It seems to be for some people. It would not be for me. I already get tired of knitting the body of a normal size cardigan in the round, so I don't know how I would fare with a whole dress of doing that. I also don't think I will ever knit or crochet a pair of trousers. I pin a lot of them, but I never actually make any myself. I think it's just easier to buy a pair, and I say easier in quotation marks, you know. I don't want to take away from the experience and the fun and the craft of making trousers. For me, it would just be easier. I do think it's obviously difficult to find a good fit, so making one for yourself would kind of make it more for your body shape. But equally, I wouldn't want to take the risk of spending ages and ages knitting a pair of trousers and then it either not fitting or something going wrong in the blocking process, or me not actually ending up wearing them that much, where I would just rather buy a pair of knitted trousers. I never have, because with everything else that I'm mentioning, it's still in the back of my mind that maybe one day I will make a pair of trousers, but I probably won't. And I probably will still include trousers and dresses in my like inspo videos for the seasons. I never learn, but you know, you can still dream, you can still hope. I think people also enjoy knitting and crocheting for different reasons sometimes. The act of knitting and crocheting is so enjoyable and it is so fun. It's not always about the finished piece. So if you want to work on one project for ages and ages and ages, why not work on a pair of trousers or a dress or a big blanket? Because that's going to keep you occupied for ages and ages. I also really enjoy the process of knitting and crocheting. However, I also really enjoy the process of learning something new. So if I'm doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, I don't find that as satisfying as, I don't know, making a jumper and then making a hat and then making a different thing in that same amount of time as it would take someone to knit a dress. Not because I am desperate for the quantity of items, but because I love learning new techniques and trying out different new ideas and stuff like that. So when I say that things will take too long for me, I'm not saying at all that knit or crocheting should be rushed. It's definitely the slow process that makes it such a fun hobby. Then the last thing, I don't think you'll ever catch me knitting or crocheting, is toys or amigurumi. It seems like such a cool and intriguing skill to have and such a cool thing to be able to gift to someone. I'm also completely ignoring the fact that every time I've tried to knit or crochet 3D, it turned out absolutely diabolical, but we're just gonna ignore that part of it. The idea of making gifts for people was already very difficult for me as a very selfish knitter and crocheter, because I'm obsessed with making my own things. On top of that, I would just much rather buy this off someone else who likes to knit and crochet these things than make one myself. There's so many talented people out there who I could purchase that from. I just simply wouldn't put myself through crocheting or knitting something that I don't enjoy, or in this case, I'm very bad at. Now I have an equally long, if not longer list of things that I refuse to buy because I know I can just make them myself. Anything where the handmade look is key to the item, even with like store-bought items, sometimes it's meant to like look handmade, I will always replicate it instead. I fear I'm treading in dangerous territory here talking about this, but I would personally say that crochet generally has a more handmade and less polished look. Now hear me out, I have a reasoning behind this. I think handmade does not equal bad or poor quality. I simply mean that due to the nature of crochet only ever being able to be made by hand, it to me naturally translates as more handmade than knit. Knit can be constructed in so many obscure ways to the point where it kind of loses the knit effect and it feels more polished simply because it literally followed a machine formula. No matter where you see the crochet piece, where you buy the crochet item from, it has always 100% been made by hands, physical hands. So therefore I would always just crochet something myself, because to me the nature of crochet is that it is not meant to be machine polished perfect. The same of course also goes for knit. Like not every knit piece has to be polished. Obviously the fine knit stuff that has been made by the machine can be more perfect and polished, whereas other pieces maybe aren't like that. But I fear I will be going round and round in circles if I try and just reiterate this point. I feel like you understand what I'm trying to say here, hopefully. So let's move on. Granny squares. Anything granny square ever, I would never buy new. It is so easy, it is so quick to make granny squares. I would never buy granny square blanket, a granny square vest, anything granny square. I will make that myself. The same also goes with granny stitch really. It's just so easy to make myself. I would never see that in a store or in a charity shop and think to buy that. If anything, I'll take a picture of it, foot and spoke, and make it myself. I also just would never buy anything new that is crochet. So now I'm talking store-bought this time. If I see something that's handmade crochet in a charity shop, maybe I would buy it. If I wanted to buy a crochet piece like brand new, I would prefer the knit alternative where something is knit in a way to make it look like crochet. I can get behind that way more than buying something that's cheap that has been crocheted by hand, where there are question marks around the working conditions of the person who had to crochet that by hand. But again, if it's crochet, I know I can just make that myself anyways. I'm also probably more confident and experienced in reconstructing and re-engineering from like seeing an item in crochet than I am in knit. I'm not as good with knitting to just like see something and replicate it. So maybe that's also where my preference for handmade crochet items is coming from. I don't know. Then hats, gloves, bags, and probably most accessories, I would just crochet or knit myself. Now I'm not talking about like canvasy tote bags. I still obviously buy them. They don't really take that much time to make. They can be really fun to make bespoke as well. Like I love hand knitting or hand crocheting is that no one else would be able to buy in a store. It's a really fun, easy, uncomplicated way to give something a personal touch without dedicating loads of time and loads of money on it. Literally cannot remember the last time I bought a hat brand new. Couldn't tell you. I'm more hesitant to buy anything that's super colorful, that has stripes, or is a statement piece new, because I know I can make a like statement piece, colorful piece really easy with knit and crochet. Now while I'm less likely to make sort of basic items myself, just because I know I can find them secondhand really easy, I do find you have the benefit with making something yourself where you have access to really fun colors, really fun yarn, and just generally creating things that are not available to buy in shops that are as unique as the thing that you can make yourself. Basic items, buy new, statement pieces, make myself. Then anything chunky or cable knit, I also tend to not buy new. I mentioned before that I would totally just make, or totally have made, chunky cardigans and jumpers, because I often find that they aren't as nice when they're new. Almost. The same then also goes to cables. They are so fun to make. You have endless possibilities with cables. There are so many incredible patterns already out there, stitch patterns that you can follow. And I find it's more rare to find a nice cable item than it is to see someone make one themselves. Like I've seen so many people online make incredible cable knit jumpers. I have not seen that many incredible cable knit jumpers in a shop. And then the last thing that I would rather make than buy new know, a small tops, tank tops, crop tops type of vibe. This again, I feel like is harder to buy in a shop without being super basic. So by making it yourself, you just have so many more interesting and unique avenues to go down, interesting details you can add that the store would just never even come up with. To be honest, the main thing I love about this is that you can make it to size. I would often freehand tops and little cute things like this because I can just make it to my own dimensions. As someone who has somewhat of a larger chest, finding cute top designs that cover the areas that need to be covered is really difficult. I also personally love like a higher neck but backless feature. I can then just make that myself rather than spending hours and hours trying to find this like very bespoke top that I have visualized in my head. I think also this is a good counter argument to what I said right at the start, where if I'm starting a project but the only inspiration I can source is like the high street item, that I should just buy it. The flip side to that is if I have a very specific item in my head that I have somehow constructed and I cannot for the life of me find it in any store, that means I need to make it myself because it probably does not exist in that specific design, construction, whatever, and it's time for me to make that happen. I feel like I've just been like ranting and doing a lot of hand motions trying to get my point across, but I would just like to reiterate that I am not trying to tell anyone what to do, offend anyone who is potentially making the things that I'm saying to not make. This is completely personal and has just been a really good rule to stick to and follow when I'm trying to pick projects to make, because it can be very overwhelming when you have so much inspiration and stuff around you. I kind of, with this list, have a very good idea of items that I just tend to stay away from and other items that I just prefer to focus on. For some of you that might be the complete opposite, and that's absolutely fine. I would love to hear in the comments what your items are that you refuse to make yourself, or items that you cannot stand seeing in the store that you would just rather make. Would love to hear what is on other people's priority lists for that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope I will see you next time. Until then, goodbye.